So I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you all for taking the time out of your day to join us. My name is Billy D, and I'm the head of client services with Intrinsic Clinical Systems. Our webinar today is titled, Is Not Having a CTMS Costing You? And in it, we're going to look at some clinical trials from a few different perspectives, review some common questions and scenarios, and talk about the CTMS from Intrinsic. So I've given demos in the past where I've given details and background about the development history of the CTMS, and today I'm going to give you a very high-level overview because I really want to get into our presentation. So you see Matt Kiernan and Eric Lake on the screen here. They were life science consultants. They worked together. They started their own life sciences consulting company over 10 years ago. And with over a combined 30 years of experience in the industry where they were implementing CTMS solutions for clients, they started to wonder why they keep hearing the same complaints about clinical trial management systems. So the main complaints being, they have everything in the kitchen sink and are priced accordingly. They're outdated. They have a bad user experience and require a heavy IT footprint. So after hearing the same pain points from clients and seeing the lack of innovation in existing CTMS solutions, they started to wonder what's the holdup and why are we still working with tools like this? And they decided to fix it. So I will get into the demo of our system and show you how it was built to look very clean and modern and easy to use. But for now, I want to discuss clinical trial management and CTMSs. So here on the screen, we see a few common questions that people and companies ask when they're managing clinical trials and find themselves considering a CTMS. And let's just go through them here. So the first is, what do you need to manage your studies? And the second, if you're outsourcing studies, do you still need a CTMS? And finally, when do you need a CTMS? What is your CTMS breaking point? And now if you're working without a CTMS, and chances are if you're attending this webinar, you probably are, you hear these questions every few months in meetings, and there's some discussions, and people make suggestions about what they used in the past, and ultimately the same conclusion is reached, right? Can anyone guess what it is? You can use your question interface to make a suggestion here. I'll just give you a moment. Yeah, I see a few responses coming in, and they're all saying the same thing, and it's correct. The general consensus you usually come to in those meetings is, right now it's just not worth the cost, but let's revisit it once the trials get into deeper phases or when our pipeline is a bit fuller, right? And you have those meetings over and over again. It's basically lather, rinse, repeat. And those type of discussions really only look at the actual cost of a CTMS. They never evaluate at how you're spending your money when you work without one. So I'd like to move on into those peoples and scenarios I mentioned in my introduction, because those questions we just reviewed can have answers that are very different depending on who you ask and what their pipeline looks like. And types of questions asked and the type of data that's important to a person will be dependent on their position, at what point in the clinical trial process they're involved. So let's first look at the study startup. So now, this is a clinical trials webinar with a clinical trial audience, so I'm sure you've heard these statistics or something like it, but I really think it's worth reviewing again. And that is that over 40% of clinical trials are completed late. An estimated 80% of trials fail to meet their initial enrollment targets on time, and 50% of sites fail to meet their activation target. So the study startup is going to ask questions like, when will my sites be activated on time? What is outstanding or overdue, for each preventing me from shipping drugs? What sites have IRBs with a long cycle approval time? Those cycle times are killer and really important to pay attention to. Which sites are going to be delayed? Which sites are currently delayed? And do I need more sites? Next up, we have the study manager. Now, a good study manager is involved and will make valuable contributions while conducting the trial, potentially saving money and avoiding unworkable systems. The study manager will ask questions like, how risky is the site? Do I need to reproject my enrollment? How do I know if I need more sites? Am I going to meet first patient screened and last patient enrolled? Will I lock the database on time? And this is probably not the most important question, but it's definitely the question that keeps most study managers awake at night. And that is, if an executive asks how my study is going, do I know the statistics well enough to give them the right answer? Next up, we move into the executive, who is concerned with the big picture, with the budget, timing, and resources. And the executive is going to ask questions like, where are we with our studies? Are we on track? Where are the monthly reports? Do we get them from the CRO or are we doing them in-house? If I want to do more studies, do I have enough money and resources? And do I have a standard set of reports to answer big questions? So, from those three personas we just described, we really run the gamut of trials and their personas from the startup to the day-to-day and the big picture. And as we can see, everyone wants something different, but it's all for the same goal, getting to market as quickly as possible while incurring the least amount of cost. So now that we've talked about some generic questions that everyone considers a CTMS had asked, let's take a deeper look at different points on the clinical trial process and see what people at different points in the process are looking for. And let's actually take a look at some different companies to see how their pipeline might affect their decision. So we like to ask the question, where is that CTMS breaking point? At what point might you need a CTMS, and at what point will you definitely need a CTMS? Now, here we see 5 different companies, all with different pipelines. We see that Biotech A, and they have a total of 3 studies, only 1 in phase 2. So at this point, they can probably manage their studies internally. There's probably not a need for a CTMS yet. Biotech B, it's not as clear cut. We've got 4 in phase 1, 2 in phase 2. So they have a lot to manage right now, and it's only going to get worse as they move through the phases. They might need a CTMS. And after that, we look at biotechs C, D, and mid-pharma company, all with multiple studies in phase 1 and 2, a few also in phase 3. They're going to need a CTMS if they want to avoid becoming those statistics that we talked about before. So let's look at one of these companies. Let's look at biotech C, where we have 5 phase 1, 3 phase 2, and let's kind of explore them. So here's another statistic for you. The average phase 2 clinical trial uses 35 sites. So with Biotech C, they could be tracking data for 105 sites for a phase 2 alone. Do you know what tracking milestones, just milestones, nothing else, for 105 sites could look like if you were doing it yourself, doing it in Excel? So here we have a spreadsheet with milestones down the left side of the column and sites across the top. And we don't even see the entire picture. So if we zoom out once, we see a little bit more of what's going on, and we can do it even again. All of this information, we're not seeing the big picture. All of this information is probably on different files, on different employees' machines, not being reported on, not raising flags, and most importantly, not being useful. So is not having a CTMS costing you? When you track in Excel, you have multiple people tracking data, multiple spreadsheets tracking data on different people's machines. These first 2 items leads to hours wasted managing spreadsheets. And what's going to happen is you're going to have missed target, late milestones because of fragmented information on different spreadsheets. And you have an inability to foresee any issues due to this lack of reporting. So if I go ahead, let's explore our options for Biotech C. Let's look at the 3 ways people go about tracking their clinical trials and the pros and cons of each. So in the first one here, we're getting the reports from the CRO. The pros are that they have your data and you have an existing relationship there. The cons are maybe not all the data is contained. There could be some one-offs that are important to someone on your leadership team that they're not seeing. In the same vein, these are not standard reports. Things you might want to see are not reported on, and when you don't see what you want, there's that lack of customization. They are what they are, and you have to dive down into the data itself to get what you want. If you're using multiple CROs, you're going to have different reports, and you can't put a value on having a consistent set of reports. It makes life so much easier for all parties involved, especially executives. So the next option we have is the medium risk option, and that's to build your own CTMS in Excel. And the pros there are you get the exact CTMS you want, and it's really a one-time expense. You're investing that, and then you have what you need. And the cons are, there's a heavy time investment there, to get that up and running. There's a lack of experience. You don't know how to build a CTMS. You don't know the flow. You don't know how people are going to want things put in. We all know when we handle a project internally, you get the issue of too many cooks, too many people getting involved, saying what they want, what works for one team doesn't work for another. When you're building this in CTMS, you're going to hold all the responsibilities. When you're building in Excel, you're responsible for training, you're responsible for documentation, you're responsible for support, any questions, things like that. You're wasting hours tracking spreadsheets, as we talked about before. It's all fragmented and all over different people's machines. And during all this time, your resources could have been better used elsewhere. You could have been, doing something else with all that time. So finally, we have the low risk. This is where you utilize the CTMS, and the pros of this are if you're working with a CRO, you can bring in data directly from the CRO. CTMSs use APIs to bring in live data directly into the CTMS. The CTMS can host all of your data, and it's going to meet all sort of regulatory standards, so you know that everything is up and running and going to be approved. It's built for reporting, right? So CTMSs, they come with a standard set of reports that you're able to get out of the system. Most have configuration options, so if you have any sort of change in terminology, change in milestone names, things like that, if there's anything you want to do, you're able to do that. And then you have fewer responsibilities. So when we talked about the medium risk option, where if you build it in Excel, you're holding all the responsibilities, you have the least amount of responsibilities as far as training. There's documentation that you're going to get, things like that. The cons of option 3 here, utilizing a CTMS is, excuse me, you're going to pay those subscription fees in order to use the CTMS, and change management. So there's a resistance to use another system from the people who are managing your trials. Now, before we move on to the next slide, one note I want to say to the people who maybe consider themselves kind of in the biotech A and biotech B buckets, where the need was not there, or you might be close to needing a CTMS, there are two things to consider there as well. And this is from my own experience implementing CTMS and training its users. The first is change management, like we just talked about it. If you're in biotech A or B, it's easier to achieve that change management earlier in the process. If you start with a CTMS at a point where biotech C and D are, where you have 8 trials occurring and people managing multiple trials and everyone's really busy and stretched thin, it's going to be harder to get people to adopt to a new system, say when you had somewhere between 3 to 5 trials. With the biotechs that need a CTMS, those people are working on those trials. They're fully ingrained in a process right now. So you're going to experience difficulty trying to get them to change that. Even when the change is there to make things easier and will make things easier, you're still going to have that pushback. Second, it's also worth noting that in all implementations that I've been a part of, companies eventually want their legacy data in the system as well, so that they can see the reports with as much data as possible. Now that they're paying for those reports, they want to evaluate those cycle times, see what works best, and they want the data in the system so it can be reported on. So what I'm saying is, yes, while you're early in your clinical trials and you only have a few, you can probably handle it without a CTMS, and yes, it's attractive to save some money right then. But like this webinar is called, is not having a CTMS costing you, those early cost savings will be exceeded, because when you finally decide to go with a CTMS, you're going to have everyone switching processes while they're extremely busy, while accommodating requests to get legacy data in the system. And that legacy data could have been raising flags, helping you with site selection, helping you avoid being one of those statistics we were talking about, and helping you achieve that goal we all strive for of getting to market as quickly as possible. So let's talk about the high risk option again. That was option 1. If you look at the slide here, you see that we live in an outsourced world, and almost all of drug development task outsourcing has grown steadily over the past decade, with clinical research, the item I have highlighted, seeing the highest increase from year to year. And with that increased outsourcing comes increased oversight. The new GCP was released, and it represents the biggest revision of the internal ICH GCP guidelines for over 20 years. So just because your CRO is keeping track of all of your data, out of sight does not mean out of mind. Sorry, excuse me for 1 second. I'm fighting a bit of cold. I'm just going to take a sip of water here. Thank you for that. So what level of oversight is needed with these new guidelines? Let's talk about that. The site should assure that there's a suitable monitoring plan in place to supervise the different individuals engaged with the study. 2 sections concerning the investigator's responsibilities, which are revised in the new ICH GCP regulations, are adequate resources and records and reports. So that's something that was updated. From a CRO standpoint, they must ensure oversight of any trial-related duties and should document approval of any subcontracting of all trial-related duties and functions by a CRO. So the further responsibilities of sponsors concerning the CROs are going to give them greater control of management over their clinical trials. So this is really how the sponsors and the CROs interact there. The next thing about the sponsor itself is that you need to control the information. The data capturing program was also covered in great detail. You need written procedures in place for all electronic systems that are used in the trial. A standard operating procedure for validation and functioning testing, data collection and handling, system maintenance, system security measures, change control, data backup and recovery, contingency planning and decommission. So the duties for the use and training of the electronic systems must be clearly defined. Moreover, the integrity of the data needs to be kept when the electronic system utilized in the study are updated with the new version of the software and when data reconciliation takes place. So that's a lot to handle. You need to make sure your CRO is doing it right, and trying to do it yourself, you need to make sure that you're doing all of that right. So we've talked about how different personas need different things from a CTMS. We've looked at scenarios for a CTMS breaking point. We've talked about 3 different options companies have for managing their trial, and we've touched on the new ICH GCP E6R2 and how the responsibilities a sponsor has for managing their data for their trials now requires a validated CTMS more than ever. But the bottom line is we still live in an outsourced world. The Intrinsic CTMS is set up for minimal data entry and easy importing. 10 areas that the CTMS can save you time by importing the data of your clinical trial information from your CRO. So before you even start using the system, we can send you our templates that you can fill out with all of your study setup items like sites, institutes, investigators, studies, study countries. So when you start using our CTMS, everything is already there for you to pick from. Once you get into the study management, we can either pull in things like enrollment, milestones, budget, regulatory documentation, essential documents directly from the CRO, or we have easily import and export from the system, which I can show you. So with that, we've kind of gone through the presentation portion of the webinar, and now I'm going to move into the demo itself and kind of show you around and show you how you can get the data into the system. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the benefits of using a CTMS and kind of how using Excel can get a little out of hand. So let's look at how some of that really granular information. We're going to go through some enrollment and some milestones, and then look at some reporting so you can just see the difference. Like I showed you that, like I said, that Excel sheet, but let's get into how you get information into the CTMS itself. So here is the home opening screen of our CTMS. We're looking at the studies, and if I click on any one of these studies, I'll click on this one right here. This is how you navigate to a particular study to start using it, to start entering the information into the system. Here you're going to see that this is the study level information. It doesn't go down into the details of enrollment and milestones. So this is a nice, neat way that to set everything up and to associate everything together. But you're really not going to see that benefit until we get down into things like enrollment. So let's go there. So if I go ahead and I click on this study right here, and I go and we review the enrollment. This is the enrollment table. This is where you would go to put all the information. The enrollment table is built off of you entering your FPE and LPE into the system. So as soon as you enter that information, these tables create themselves. And here is where you would input that information. So really the benefit here is you're not looking at a spreadsheet that contains a bunch of information not relevant to this study. You're not looking at all enrollment for all of your studies. When you're creating your studies and your study countries and your sites, you're coming in here and seeing only what you want to work with. So, we all know study managers they don't need to see what's going on with other studies. They're really only interested in what's going on with theirs. So the benefit to using a CTMS in here is it's clean, it's easy to use, it's easy to navigate, and they're not seeing all the erroneous information that they don't need to see. It's very easy to input your information just by clicking in the boxes here. And the other piece of information, like we said, it's easy. We can import any information from directly via an API from a CRO that would populate all of these tables. Or you could go ahead and just do an import-export right here directly from the system. Export this information, send it to your CRO to populate. They send it back to you, and all you do is then easily import the data into the system like that. So a couple different ways to get information in and out of the system. 3 actually that we just did, using the CTMS itself, via an API, or via an import file. Next, I want to jump back down to the sites. I know we looked at some shots of some sites milestones, how those could kind of be reflected when we were in the presentation. But now I'd like to show how our sites milestones works in the system. So all the milestones are configurable. You can go into the milestone template portion of the system, and which is right here, and this is where you could go ahead and create new milestones, add them to be displayed at the project, study country, or site level. And then once you set, they come with an out-of-the-box configuration, but you're able to change that any way you like. So if now we come in here and we go to the sites milestones, this is where you're going to see the milestones that you can input into the system right here. We have a planned date and an actual date. And once again, the benefit here is when we were looking, if I just jump back really quick to the presentation, when you're looking at all of this information right here, all your sites, all your milestones across all studies, or looking and seeing exactly what you want, which is site number 1 here, putting in these individual milestones for the planned and the actual date. Much easier, much cleaner, much easier to understand and input. We've also added some functionality into the system. If I were to go up to the study level milestones and click on any one of these studies, so like I said, there's milestones at every level of the system, and to help people save time, we know that a lot of times people are using the same type of planned milestones for the study for their sites. So what you're able to do in here is enter your study milestones here at the study level, and you're going to see these easy drop downs to use right here, where you can go ahead and select any study country that's within this study that you would like to select. So if I wanted to copy any milestone down to these 3 countries, I could do just that. So I've selected the countries that I want to copy them down to, and then I can select the milestones I want to copy down. I could just blanket and do all of them, or I could once again pick and choose exactly what I wanted. And then I could do the same thing with sites. We've set up the sites milestone over here to include the investigator name, because a lot of times people said they really wanted it was easier for them to recognize an investigator name rather than a site. So that was something that a bit of feedback that we listened to from the clients and put in here. So once again, an easy way. So you're kind of eliminating more data entry, and you're keeping your data standards high by putting any milestones here at the study level and then copying them down to the lower levels of the system, down to the study country, down to the site level. So the next thing we wanted to talk about, so that's, like I said, those are the 2 areas that people, when getting the data into the system, they're most concerned with, right? They know that they can come to this study screen right here and put the name of the study, the therapeutic area, the phase, things like that. They know that information, it's easy to do. But it's when you're tracking on those sometimes daily, but more often weekly and monthly things that you want to get the information in the system. It's really about the enrollment, and it's about the milestones that people want to get information into the system as quickly as possible to be reported on and for everyone involved. So now that we've talked about, the things that people want to see, the data that they want to get into the system to see these reports, let's go ahead and look at the reports in the system. So if you were to come to the CTMS dropdown right here and click on the dashboard option right here, it would take you where you could select the visualization that you wanted to see. Here you'll see them listed in alphabetical order. As you can see, there's some dev reports right here that we're currently working on, but then below that we have our standard out of the box. This is our demo environment. Here's our standard reports we have that start at the portfolio level, go to the study country, and then down to the site. We utilize Microsoft Power BI for these reports. So if you were to click on any one of these things, it would just open up Microsoft Power BI, and you would just click sign in, because as our CTMS is built in Microsoft Dynamics, it's built on the Microsoft stack, so is Power BI, your login is going to be the same. So all you do is click sign in, and it automatically pulls in your credentials that you're using for the CTMS and brings you into this view. Here we see our standard reports that are out of the box. As I said, they start at the portfolio level and then go down. Here we have the portfolio graph. So we have studies by therapeutic area, by program, by compound. Clicking on any one of these visualizations focuses in on them so you can see and highlight exactly what you want to see. If I were to click this box right here, I could zoom in on each individual graph or visualization itself, and then just going back to the report is as easy as that. All of the visualizations are really going to be either straight visual or tabular or a combination of the two. Next up, we go to the portfolio summary report right here, and as you can see, this is more tabular in nature. Next up, we go to the study enrollment status, which, like I said, is you're going to see a combination of both right here. Here we have some study enrollment percentage, countries active, percent sites active, percent period complete, percent complete, and then some tabular information down here. Next up, we have the study startup graph, which is queuing off the milestones, the actual milestones in the system, not the plan, but this anytime, you can see right here that BC study 002 does not have any sites active because that activation date has not been input into the actual yet. So really anytime a color is here, it means that an actual date has been met and input into the system. Next up, we have similar to the study startup graph, we have the sites startup graph. Then we have site event dates, which is pulling in all the important site event dates here. Site enrollment status, pulling in all the enrollment information pertaining to each individual site. And then a lot of people are really interested in the enrollment graph because that's what people want to queue off of and people want to see. So here we are going to open up the enrollment graph, and this is, like I said, the graph that most people are interested in seeing. As you can see, you can use the filtering option over here. We're pre-filtered on a particular study for this demo so we can see, but selecting, you can trigger off a year, a program, a country, or a particular study. Anything that we can add additional filters here, not hard to do. These are the ones we have out of the box. And here you see the enrollment curve going around the bottom. It starts early, and then you get into the actual enrollment periods in the system. And here you see that if you wanted, here's the legend right here showing you everything. But if you wanted to zoom in on anything, if you wanted to only see patients enrolling per month plan versus actual, you could go ahead and do that. If you wanted to see patient screening plan versus actual, you can do that. So you can see it all on one image like we were showing you there, or you can zoom in and see each of the 4 different aspects right here that you want to say, oh, it looks like we were recently playing with some new color schemes, as you can see. So then if I go ahead and just click on all, we go back to the full report where you're seeing everything. So that's it. Oh, you know what? No, I think that there's one more thing I want to cover. I know we had some questions come in. I will get to them before we get into the questions. I just want to jump back out of the reports and back into the system itself because we've talked a lot about the different ways that people can use the system to manage their studies. And we've talked about the other options that are out there, getting the information and reports directly from the CRO, or building your own CTMS via Excel, which is the way a lot of people do it. And people like Excel because it's a familiar tool, right? Everybody knows how to use it. You've been using it for, over 2 decades now. And the great thing about this view right here, so we call this view in the system the general entity view. And everything under this CTMS dropdown has this view right here. We were to look at sites, studies, institute, countries. It's all going to be displayed in this tabular view right here. And the great thing is, because it's a Microsoft tool, it functions like Excel. So here you can see over here we have a filtering option if you wanted to filter on any particular study, project, if you wanted to see certain phases, if you wanted to see certain date ranges, things like that. Every header is able to be filtered on just by clicking this button. The other great thing about these general entities, so you're able to customize these and have as many as you want. So as you can see, if I click on this active studies drop down right here, you'll see that I have my own view. I have Billy's view right here. So if I click on as you can see, we have things like protocol ID, short name, project name. If I go ahead and I say, well, I've customized this to show what I want reflected. I wanted to see enrollment right away and how it's how planned was going in actual. This is my view. I can take things, and you're not just reorganizing. You take things out, you're adding them in. There's also a budget view I have right here. So I wanted to see some budget information. I've set it up to be the first 2 columns right here. there's no limit to the number of personal views you can have. If you just create a personal view, there's no sort of programming involved. It's all a very easy user interface to do. You go ahead and, like I said, create personal view. You edit the columns, and now you're able to pull in any data in the system that you want to be displayed and manipulate where it's displayed in the table. It's as simple as clicking on Add Columns and looking at the information that's collected at the study level in the system and pulling it in right here. If you wanted to show any CRA information we see here, if you wanted to bring in any baseline information you can see right here, anything you want, it's as simple as selecting these boxes, hitting OK, and then moving them around like this and giving it a name and saving it. It's that simple. You can have as many as you want right here. And that leads us to our next piece of information, which is really great, is that you can export all of this information to Excel. So really, people look at this like an ad hoc reporting tool, right? So here, if I go, we go back to the default view in the system. If you wanted to export any of this information from the system, you go to Excel and you can export it as a static worksheet. This is a snapshot of what's happening at 12:32 on November 14th right here, or you can export it as a static worksheet. And what that's going to do is, so if you click the static option and you go ahead and you export this and save it to your desktop, every time you open that file on your machine, it's going to refresh with the latest information in the system. So like I said, this is how people use it as an ad hoc reporting tool. If in those visualizations we have that I showed you in the system, there's some information you don't want, you can ask us to create a custom report for you, which we're happy to do and we've done in the past, but there's a way you can get that information yourself just by going ahead, creating any kind of personal view you want, and then exporting it to Excel in a dynamic worksheet is going to make it so every time you open it, you're seeing exactly what you want from the system. So you could set up, you could do that, like I said, with the studies. You could do that with the sites, any personal views you want to create. You're able to do, and then export. All of these general entities function the same way. So, like I said, a great way that you can set up the system to see everything you want. So we got a couple questions at this point. I'm going to go ahead and get into them right now. Please use the GoToMeeting interface to ask any questions that you might like. So the first question we've received is, how do you limit access or make things read-only? Great question. The way you're able to do that is that this system is not a user-based system like SharePoint is a role-based system. So we come with roles clearly defined and what they have access to, and then you assign your study managers to those particular roles. Very easy to do. We can customize those roles as well. If, like, let's say you say, well, I don't want my study managers to be able to edit that piece of information, we can say, okay, we can take that permission away, or we could create another role where everything's the same as study manager with just that one little tweak. So any way you want to do it, we can create a role and then we can decide exactly what they have access to. And there's a template we can send to you so you can fill that out and see exactly what you would get. Next question we received, and if you forgive me, I'm just going to take another sip of water. Next question we received is, how do you limit who sees what? So okay, so this is from the same person. The first question was about access, and then this question is about who sees what. For example, if you wanted to give access to someone like a CRO or someone outside of the company, yes, you can do that very easily. So there's a way that you can create teams, and we can do this for you, or we always set up a super user with most clients that has admin access, and we train them how to use the system and to set these things up. But we can absolutely make it so that a certain team a team of 5 people could only see studies 1 and 2, and then another team of 5 people are only seeing studies 3 and 4. Everything's going to eventually get reported on if you wanted to pull out the reporting, but if you were just having people come in and wanting to input some information in the system, yes, you can make it so it's all going in to your storage and to your database, to your instance of the system, but the people who are inputting are only getting access to what you want them to be inputting in the system. Next up we have, is there an eTMF that are integrated? Yes, absolutely. We have an eTMF in the system, and we leverage SharePoint for that. Sorry, I'm trying to go in and show you. I can show you really quickly. So if I go and click on studies, and I know I have some files in this particular, I think this is a hypertension study right here. So what you're able to do, or endocrinology, pardon me, we leverage SharePoint for the eTMF storage and documentation. So what you would do is you would click on the drop down for this particular study, and then you would go to your documents. And what this is just kind of a window to what's into SharePoint. This is not where you upload the documents. This is not where you store them. This just shows you where they are in kind of the root folder. If you go ahead and you could click on Open, and then you would go to the eTMF SharePoint, and a new window would open up. And this is where this is where you would put everything in. This is where you would actually work. Because we accessed it from the GVB ST1 study, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing this particular folder structure. Everything here is, we go off the DIA reference model for the folder structure, but we're happy to use any other folder structure that people might have, but this is the default. If I click on the home really quickly, I can just show you a little bit of how it works. These are the four main areas you're going to be working with, uploading the data into the system, tagging it with any information, viewing what's in the system. Number 4 is really just configuration for admin users. Luckily, I know we're getting into the questions now, so I'll just kind of talk about some highlights of this portion of the system. If you were to go ahead and you could click on this documents uploaded, all these 4 options are right here on the side as well. So if I click on upload documents, this is where you could, like I said, this is where documents that have been uploaded but not tagged yet. As soon as you tag the document type, document subtype, document classification, or document status, will go away. But everything is go ahead and you just click on this drop down right here, and then you can select and tag the information. Like I said, all of this is from the DIA reference model, so you'd be able to tag with any type of information. The other cool thing we can do here is if you wanted people to be able to put things in the eTMF, but you didn't want to give them access to the system, we can also create a generic email address that people can email files to. And so you just send it to study1 at such and such, and it automatically puts it right here. A really cool aspect of the email feature that we can do, I always forget how to get to. I think if I go to add site contacts, let's take a look. Yeah, I was right. We're able to go ahead and set it up so that if you're Matt Kiernan and you're emailing the generic address something, we can automatically set it up to pre-tag things, and we can add different things right here. So if you know something coming from a particular study manager, CRO, CRA is going to only be about this particular site, this study country, you can go ahead and set it up so that the system will automatically strip out the document and tag it with anything you have detailed right here. So that's the 2 ways you can get it. You can just drag and drop in the upload. You can email. Then we go down here to the view documents. It's pretty self-explanatory, but I'll just walk through a couple things. This is where you can view everything in the system. And by the different ways. So here we have by documents, by type, by subtype, by assigned to, by country, by site status, things like that. You can expand and close these things. This is how you get to see everything that is in the eTMF. Sorry, I just have to go back to the question interface now using the GoToMeeting. There is an eTMF integrated. I know there was another one I saw. Can CROs import data into the system? Absolutely. Like I said, we can set it up so there's an API, so it's automatically done, or we can go ahead and provide the import files to them for them to do, or for them to send to you for you to do, but absolutely. Many different ways to get data into the system, and that's what people really like about it. The remaining questions that we have received are about just setting up further demos for other people who have attended for their coworkers to see. So with that, I guess I would say, unless there's any other questions, we're going to end it there for the day. I'm not seeing anything else come in right now. So great. Thank you all for joining us. We've been recording this webinar, and we're going to go ahead and post it online for everyone to see, and we will send out an email notifying you all when it's up. So once again, thank you all for joining our webinar today. Is not having a CTMS costing you? Thank you for your questions, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks again.